course, the strikes aren't the only issue facing those trying to get around the capital. The snow and ice is still causing problems, particularly on some pavements and cycle paths. Some say the authorities should routinely grit them too, not just the roads. Well, Thomas Magill is at a gritting depot in Kensington and Chelsea for us. Thomas, hope you're wrapped up warm.
I certainly am, yes, Lakshmi, but much of the snow from yesterday has gone. But temperatures are still struggling to get above zero, which means today ice is the problem, particularly on those footpaths and on the cycleways. Now, the key thing is across London for many local authorities is to get these mountains of grit that they have onto those roads and footpaths. Much more on that and the guys that do that in a moment. As I say, much of it for the roads. Footpaths, well, they fare less well off, which means that many people have had to turn to imaginative ways to get themselves and their children around London today. Some people have even decided to avoid footpaths altogether, taking to the roads themselves to walk along the street. And that's a concern for some bodies who speak on behalf of pedestrians. They say that conditions like those today, that snow that's now turned to ice, is leaving many residents and many Londoners very vulnerable.
My concerns are that people will be put off walking and using those more sustainable travel methods with pavements not being gritted. I mean, my real concern is for those who are more vulnerable, such as, particularly older people, people in wheelchairs, people who are just less steady on their feet. Things like this can literally put those people off leaving the house. And if people do experience slips and trips out on the pavements, that can have kind of a long-lasting impact on them and put them off walking maybe in the future, which is also a big problem.
Well, I mentioned this big mountain here of grit behind me, and every local authority in London is responsible for treating their roads. And I'm at this depot here in Kensington and Chelsea to find out how preparations are underway here. Well, as you see, they've got the grit, the trucks are full of fuel, the workers are ready, but none of that happens overnight. So let's speak to Jem Kumari, one of the councillors here, to find out how does all this come together and how do you plan for it, Jem?
Thank you. Well, this isn't our first winter. We've obviously dealt with this over a number of years. What we do is make sure, firstly, that we have enough salt to get through the winter. We have nearly 700 tonnes behind us. We use about 20 tonnes a day. We make sure we make constant orders to get new stock in. And really, it's just about planning the network and the paths.
And let me ask you about, earlier we heard from that pedestrian group concerned about footpaths in London. Why do local authorities, or all local authorities, not treat footpaths? Is that a particular challenge?
No, we do treat our footpaths. We have a team out every day. They were last week dealing with leaves which had been fallen, and now they've swapped to getting grit down on the pavements. We put a particular focus on places around our hospitals and near our schools to make sure that people going to hospital and to school are able to walk safely.
OK, so not everywhere, but certainly those key areas where there's a lot of footfall. Well, of course, Jem said there's plenty here of grit, but the key thing is getting it out in the roads, and Alan is responsible for that. Alan, thank you for chatting to us. I think it's at the start of a very long night for you. What challenges do you have getting this grit onto the roads, particularly as we live in central London, lots of people and lots of cars?
Well, you've answered the question. The main problems are when it snows, it gets slippery, icy, obviously it's icy, but the main problem is the traffic and people late at night. You have to watch out for a lot of people, especially the salt when it spreads. That's the main conditions, really. And just making sure we clear any hospitals, police stations, schools. They're the main priorities, and bus routes.
Fantastic. Alan, you're an absolute gem, you and your team, because I know there's a lot of guys, not just here in Kensington and Chelsea, but in every single local authority out working throughout the night, getting mountains like this onto the roads. To spare a thought for them in order that our roads are working at least when one other mode of transport is not. Back to you, Lakshmi.